Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today, Getting Enterprise Ready with the AMP 2.3 or Agentic Advertising Management Protocols version 2.3 that we released a couple of weeks back. I'm Shailley Singh, EVP Product and CEO at IB Tech Lab, and joining me for this webinar is Aidan Cardella. He's been a key instrument in the development of our buyer and seller agents and defining the architecture of our approach to agentic advertising. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on whether you are in the West Coast, East Coast, or Europe. So we'll get started right away. So today's webinar is basically focused on what's new in AAMP 2.3, and we will also talk about what's coming next after the 2.3 version. So everything that you see here is just new things that we have released as part of 2.3 from the 2.0 version. So this is not like what we talk about today is not just not the complete set of features, but only the newer features that have been added since the last release that was 2.0. So the agenda today is we're going to talk about some of the features in more detail, like the enterprise-grade capabilities, trust and safety enhancements, a way to use standard schemas across your buyer and seller agents, agentic audiences. We've finalized how to use agentic audiences, so we'll go into a little bit more on that. We've seen a lot of industry collaboration in the last 2-3 months, so we'll cover some of the newer participants from the industry that have been collaborating with AMP and our registry. And then we'll go into what's next for AMP release, what we are planning, and then how you can get involved in this effort, in this initiative to drive agentic advertising. And then we'll leave room for open discussion or Q&A. Please use the Q&A tab or Q&A option on your panel to ask questions throughout, and we'll address them at the end. Of course, I'll take the easy questions, and Aidan will have to take the harder technical questions. Okay, so enterprise-grade deployment and interoperability. This is all based on the feedback we've been getting from companies who have been testing and trying to deploy the buyer and seller agents that we released, or especially the 2.0 version that came out in around March, April timeframe. So one of the things that people had pointed out was like it's not easy to deploy it in enterprise environments, the environments that they already use, which offer them the guarantees of security, privacy, etc., and the agreements they already have in place. So one of the first things that we've done with 2.3 is a full Amazon Bedrock agent core runtime integration, whether it's REST or MCP methods. You can now quickly install the buyer and seller agents into your Amazon environment. It's got everything that is needed for that environment to work, like the S3 backed inventory adapters, cloud provisioning, and we've also included like over 5,000 unit tests in both the agents to ensure that these deployments work as expected in those enterprise environments. On the interoperability side, we've added the streamable HTTP with the server side as a fallback, which was already there, which will continue to be there, but it's basically enhancement of the MCP transport as the MCP protocol has evolved. So we'll continue to doing that, like as the MCP protocols evolve. We just had a pretty big release 2-3 weeks back, so we'll continue making sure that our buyer seller agent reference implementations keep up with those changes that are happening on the protocol side. And we've included much more strong like OAuth for the seller in the buyer cloud. And that kind of replaces some of the legacy credential flows that we have. So we're trying to standardize on very standard technologies like OAuth for these clouds. Aidan, do you want to add anything that I may have missed?
Yeah, maybe just a couple things real quick. That's to build on what Shailley said. First, on the deployment side, of course, I'm a former Amazonian. I'm a big AWS fan, but you're not limited to AWS, right? It's not that you have to run an AWS, but we have some very nice tools that make it easy there. And then just on the other side, kind of building on overall what we've done here in 2.3 and kind of productionalizing in addition to sort of more complete testing. Like everything you hear about here is running in public repos with sort of green continuous integration today. So we've really kind of doubled down on dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and making sure these pieces work together. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Thank you. So the next thing that we've done is added capabilities so that it allows you to scale faster and gives you the flexibility to add the partners that you already work with. So in terms of horizontal scaling, we've added like pluggable storage backends. So now you can, whether you use SQLite, Redis, Postgres plus Redis, whatever combination of the backend that you have, storage backends, you can now plug them right into the seller and buyer agents. And it's not pinned to like a single node. And the other side we've done is ability to have you choose any model that you want to work with. So whether it's Anthropic, OpenAI, Google Gemini, or NVIDIA, NIM, and Hugging Face, you can choose your own model and plug them into these buyer and seller agents with ease. That whole integration has been very generalized, depending on the model that you want and the keys that you want to use with it. In addition, we are also adding more and more capabilities to be able to plug in your ad tech partners. So, for example, Google Ad Manager's reporting is there now. I think this is a typo. It's on the seller agent. So sellers can see what their GAM setup is and they can get reporting from there. And we are using the Google Ads MCP server to do that, as well as the APIs, because some of the capabilities are through the APIs. And then we have the meta ads on the buyer agent. So if you're designing a campaign or figuring out a campaign that requires you to set up meta ads campaign, you can do it right from your buyer agent using the meta ads integration that we have through the meta MCP server. Uh, and this basically is the direction that we are taking, that we want the ecosystem or the companies to be able to choose their own stack of the technology that they want to use, as well as the partners that they want to use. And you'll see that as we go along with newer releases, you will see more and more such capabilities being added. Aidan, anything?
Yeah, sure. I'll add one thing to this. This is kind of like a sneak peek of something that's already happened. Uh, and for that, I need to explain one other thing. This is version 2.3 of AMP. But as those of you who have been following along with us or are working as our partners and collaborating here know we've been moving pretty quickly. We've actually, since releasing this, moved on to 2.4. So if anybody's digging into the repos during this call, it's 2.4.1 is the latest pinned release. So one thing that's in the 2.4, but we kind of consider a part of this kind of newest storage layer feature is payment grade idempotency. So this deliberately routes replay records into to Postgres. So basically retries of booking are safe even across like node restarts and horizontal scaling and so forth. So one example of where we're enabling and taking advantage of improving our storage layer.
Yep. And just to add to that, what Aidan said, like we are releasing continuously. Like especially those who are following the GitHub repo will see like it's pretty much every day, every week that releases are happening and improvements are being made. Any reported incidents are being fixed. The only thing we do is like when we have like a package of capabilities that gives you certain specific functional capabilities, that's when we kind of announce a release and cut a release. Or if we have a breaking change, we'll cut a release at that point. But yeah, it's like work is being done pretty much every day. So the next thing I want to talk about was what we've done for trust and safety. So this was another feedback from people like, how do I trust this other agent? And there are many layers to it. We'll be talking about one layer of it here, or a couple layers of that. But this has been a feedback, like when I'm transacting with an agent, how do I trust? How do I trust that the data they're sending me is correct? And it matches exactly what they are saying it is, and I can accept that as a valid transaction. So one of the things we've added is IAB's diligence platform, which uses safeguards privacy methods. So which will basically help you to filter approved sellers and ad tech partners for privacy compliance. So, and there are like few hundred vendors and partners that are already registered there. So it's a simple API call that the buyer agent will call, and then the buyer agent would know like which agent they're transacting with is already qualified as per our privacy compliance. And this is like just the first step. In future, based on the feedback that we get, we can add more different types of policy compliances into this. The other thing is like we put in a lot of guardrails for hard data, for example, pricing. So there's enhanced pricing guardrails so that if LLM ends up incorrectly guessing a price despite getting some number from your data, but it thinks that maybe another number is better, there is guardrails to ensure that no, it's not gonna go by LLM's guesses, but it's going to go by the data that you're providing or the data that you use for decisioning methods. So there's a whole new pricing provenance field, and then there's full traceability that's available through the negotiation chain. So it's kind of logging every step of what happened between each transaction. So you can later on use that for auditing and making sure that the agents are making the right decisions or um, sending the right information across to another agent. So that's for trust and safety. There's going to be more when we discuss what's coming next about more trust, better trust and safety in the agents. Anything you want to add, Aiden, here?
Yeah, no, that's great, Shailene. And this is kind of, honestly, this is kind of the scary and fun space. Um, LLMs are pretty darn clever. And I think Matt might have been telling me yesterday about an example of an LLM that was trying to book something and it couldn't. Not this is not in our space directly, not these agents, but an LLM was trying to book something, but it couldn't, so it figured out a way to cancel somebody else's reservation so it could book its own. You know, it's hard, it's continually like hard to stop the creativity and the motivation of an LLM. But this is one of the examples that we came across here. And by the way, these several of these issues were raised by you folks, by folks who are collaborating with us, by submitting issues or cutting PRs that identified some of these problems. One example is like right now. So now a proposal can't be marked as price verified. Um, can only be marked price verified if it matches a quote the seller actually issued. So this is Shailey mentioned with the full traceability. So now it's sort of like it can't get creative off to the side and say like, well, let me go back to my rate card or let me go back to this or something. It's like, no, no, no. In this actual interaction, that number has to have come up, right? Has been passed. So um, I'm sure there will be many other ways that that LLMs figure out to work around all the things we're trying to do, but we've been able to lock down many. And thanks for the
Yep.
inputs.
Yep. Controlling LLMs will be an ongoing task.
Absolutely.
Uh, this is really important, and this is pretty smart work that Aidan has done. It's basically, if you looked at the buyer and seller agents, they had their own kind of schemas that they were kind of relying on. But what we've done with this release is we've taken out the schema or decoupled the schemas or what we're calling the primitives from the SDKs. So there's a new kind of repo, the QR codes will take you to the repo if you want to look at it. But it's the IAB Tech Lab Agentic Primitives GitHub repo. So now both the buyer and seller agents are using the same semantics and schemas for their development work. And this also uh, gives us a pathway to integrating all the existing standards for agentic AI use case. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on what's coming next. But we'll have a direct way for integrating all the existing standards that you use or that your platforms and systems already use. And so you can actually pick and choose the task or the workflow at hand and the right standard for it and build an agent off of that, agent capabilities off of that. What that does is like it drastically will reduce that semantic drift going between buyer and a seller agent because now they're using the same semantics, they're using the same object structure. So the context is, even if your models are different, even if your LLM is trying to think far ahead into the future, it still has the same context. So it'll make much better decisions, and it'll stick within the boundaries of your transaction and not try to jump out of that. It still could, but it drastically reduces that chance. Um, Aidan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I'll just share one example on this. And first of all, Shailley is too kind, like to be vocally self-critical, as my colleagues, former colleagues from Amazon say. As we were building the buyer seller agent, if any of you that we've had a chance to work together, I like to move very quickly and break things and fix them quickly. I'll take responsibility for us. Made the decision early on when we were first prototyping these to say, hey, let's not tie these two together. Let's just build them. Let's just let them go and let's move quickly. But actually, one example that was we had a name length that was like this the spec was it was 100 characters and then it was bound to 38 characters. Anyway, it silently blocked sort of a set of catalog products for a period of time, right? Like they just as if they didn't exist. And that was caught by an external tester, one of our folks, partners that we've been working with, who got a PR, and we fixed it within a day. This is exactly the kind of like schema drift Shailley mentioned, and it was personally fun for me because maybe it's my bad for not fixing this in the first place, but because we as a community caught it, fixed it, made it better, and these primitives, these schemas, we don't see that as like, hey, we're going to tell you how to run your business here. These are a natural ex or that everything has to change because of agentic and like what everything you've done in the past in advertising is like worthless or something. It's like these schemas are, building blocks that are a natural extension of IAB standards, right? And they what we found, and we'll talk a little later about like how people are using the reference code. But what we found, those building blocks can help us all be consistent and reduce errors and friction and having to or additional maintenance of the code. So it's not a prescription for this is how it should always be done, but rather, hey, here's some building blocks that can be really helpful for you, regardless of whether you're on the sell side, the buy side, or somewhere in between.
Yeah. And like Aiden said, like these are not prescriptive. These are basically descriptive. They help you describe your transaction or your object in the way that the industry has always understood that using the standards. For example, like in OpenRDB is a spec to describe your bid. Like it doesn't tell you like whether how much bid duplication you're going to do or how much information you're going to provide for each user and each device, but it has all the parameters that can describe it really well, and it's up to you like how much you want to use, or rather, I think it's up to your DSP telling you how much they want to use. So you have to give that much information at the least. So it's kind of you're developing this in a similar way that you have the right descriptors for everything, and both the buy side and the sell side understand the descriptors in the exact same way, and because they're using existing standards, they're extension of that. Your platforms that you would be using at the back end would also understand it exactly like they have understood it for the last 15 years. So that's the interoperable schema layer for both the standards. There's a lot more work to be done on this that we'll talk about later. And so that was all mostly related to the agentic buying and selling protocols. We also have been able to finalize the agentic audiences, which was LiveRamp had initially started what they call the user context protocol. And of course, Google came out with Universal Commerce Protocol, and they kind of took away the UCP acronym from us. AdTech doesn't like their acronyms being taken away, but we had to kind of shift and we call it agentic audiences, which basically uses like a vector embeddings method to describe a user and aboutness of the user and the intent, the context, and other details about the user in a very compressed mathematical numbers that can be used for comparison to a campaign's requirements. So the extension in OpenRDB is now created. A seller can now uh, 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 send a vector embedding of a user description in the OpenRDB bid request. They can define which model they are using. They can define which vendor has created that, and then they can have the actual vector embedding. So the buyer at the other end knows whether they trust that model and that vendor, and they want to use that. There's also a pre-bid module that helps sellers and publishers operationalize this on the sell side. And then this is at the protocol level, separate from the agent code bases. So this is kind of a different protocol, more geared towards being used in real-time bidding environments, but is also integrated into a buyer-seller agent. So if you want your buyer and seller agents to use vector embeddings of user descriptions, you can do that there too. So with this release, like we've fully operationalized the agentic audiences or a vector embedding method for use in deals, in auctions, and in media buying processes. Anything, Aidan, here?
Uh, well, this may be a little risk of me saying this. I'm not as deeply involved with the agentic audiences, but Shailley, this carries a provenance tag. Am I correct, or am I confusing that? I think it does, but maybe
Yeah,
I'll just, what's that?
it does.
Yeah. And having been in various spots in the ad tech space for kind of quite some time now, I've always found it incredibly frustrating the lack of transparency as to what happened upstream, right? You get this piece of information passed and you're like, you have no fucking idea where it came from or like who said it or whatever. So it's something that the team built in here, and I think you're going to see a lot more of this. Maybe Shailene will talk about that later, where it carries, what the model is, what advertisers supplied, and so forth. The information along with that embedding, which I think is a key sort of shift that hopefully we're seeing and we're driving, which is carrying provenance
Yep.
along with
Yeah,
it.
it carries like, which vendor is set it for the seller. Of course, in the bid stream, you already have the publisher information and the seller information. It also indicates like which model it is using, so you know whether you can actually use it. If that's one of the requirements for these vector embeddings, that both sides who are doing the comparison have to use the same model to do the comparisons. So it carries that basic information that any buyer would need to to fully use the embedding that they actually receive. So that's agentic audiences, which is now transaction ready.